introduce the panel. Starting from the far end, Kadima. Kadima is from JCrew and based in New York City. Give us some background on Shopzilla, the architecture that you use with Coherence.
Shopzilla is one of the world's largest, certainly the U.S.'s largest comparison shopping networks. We serve about 100 million impressions per day on a product inventory of somewhere north of about 120 million products, resulting in about 8,000 searches per second or so during our peak periods in the day. We grew from a relatively small company where we had a small single website, bizrate.com, and grew that to add in several additional brands in the U.S. All of that essentially taxed our infrastructure, which we built several years ago, circa 2000 or so. And we've invested a lot in performance and just the concept behind performance. We call it extreme speeds, and we have found out that for us anyway, Shopzilla and our broader network affiliates, that time really does equal money. We went through a website redesign a couple of years ago, so a core infrastructure redesign, reducing our page load times. This is going to get to Coherence, but reducing our page load times from around 4 or 5 seconds to under 2 seconds, second and a half, and the resulting increase in our conversion on our sites alone was somewhere between 10 and 12%. And that had nothing to do with anything except just making the website a lot faster. And to get there, Coherence has really been a cornerstone of our strategy. Initially through just sort of nuts and bolts read-through caching strategies, and now recently with our back office processing of all that data, Coherence really sits at the center of our architecture, which is service-oriented, and over the next few years we will continue to broaden the exposure of Coherence and the application of Coherence in our company to all of our back office analytics and a lot of our conditioning and data normalization processes. For our internal visualization, certainly of our grid, we use Clearstone from the Evident guys. They've also recently improved their product or added a feature to the product to help us keep track of all of our other JPEG telemetry. So we're not quite the unified dashboard concept, but it certainly gives us yet another step toward that.
Kadima, could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the architecture at JCrew?
Today we do about 50 to 70,000 sessions an hour, between 600 and 800,000 page views an hour, and our sales are pretty strong. We're I think 10th in terms of retailers. We do about 650 million a year online. Speed, performance, and our product detail is probably our most visited page and our heaviest page because it has a lot of logic in it. So Coherence is a fantastic solution for that. And this year actually we also use, besides using Coherence, we have a couple of tools, Evident, which is a monitoring tool that we've been using relative to Coherence to see how the cache is working and how you're utilizing it with your gets and puts. So it's been a very powerful tool for e-commerce. So I don't know.
What was the mistake you made that you learned the most from, or the thing you maybe should have seen? Or
for us, the biggest challenge was in a data set the size of ours, where we have in raw size it's probably about 100 gigs, but it's about 120 million or so products, along with all of the corresponding metadata from the merchants that provide us the products and things like that. That and management. So we do operate in a 24/7, 365 environment like all these guys. And for us, visualization of all this data, where it was, our hotspots and things like that, and configuration and the ability we have, I think, somewhere on the order of about 20 or 30 software releases a week, affecting our website ecosystem and touching our caches. And certainly, since we're still in the growth phase of our Coherence penetration, we have quite a lot of new caches and new uses of Coherence coming up literally every month. And certainly as we're all rushing for the holidays now, that pace is really extreme right now. So we struggled in the early days, just generally speaking, with our environment, certainly with Coherence, and getting the right level of visualization or understanding. We also use Clearstone, like the JCrew guys from Evident. In a world where you get what you measure, we're all paying attention to metrics all the time. We decided that if we wanted to get the kind of performance that would translate into the right kind of user experience, you know, Google set the bar, right? You search, the results are instantly there, and somehow they just know. If we wanted to try to replicate that experience on an e-commerce site, which is much, much heavier, has a lot of images and all sorts of things like that, we decided we needed two SLAs. Our server-side SLA, where products like Coherence and all of our other strategies for scaling and design really come into play. And then also our user experience SLA, where we actually separate what goes on behind the scenes with what goes on in the web browser. I can give all sorts of stats. When we did our redesign, dropping from 4.5 seconds to about 1.5 seconds, our conversion, as I mentioned earlier, on our site went up somewhere between 10 and 12% depending on the brand. Our page views increased by 65 to 70%. Mundane things like the Google bot. It was always our theory that Google's had a fixed amount of dwell time on the site, and it turns out that that's about true, and the time that Google spent on our site was linearly proportional to the increase in page load. So Google spent, or covered, roughly about 3 times more of our site when they crawled. And everything associated with that experience has also changed. So we have very, very real numbers. We actually publish it on our tech blog, the ways that we keep track of the metrics that we use, and then the financial impact on performance. And for Shopzilla, and certainly for any of the comparison or any of the e-commerce sites out there, performance has to be absolutely key.
And we're also extremely focused on performance. We have actually seen a correlation in terms of lost revenue when we don't have a good performing website. And performance actually can be manifold, right? There's this notion of you have to look at and say, okay, is the end user experience the most critical? And obviously it is, right? So for a website like Macy's, which is very focused on brand, extremely rich content on a page, because there's a lot of images, a lot of content there. We have a couple of layers that we focus on performance. One is, i.e. the edge, which is Akamai and other pieces. So we say, okay, how are we doing there? Are we caching everything? Is the cache hit ratio high there, or is most of the content coming back to the origin? So whatever edge caching that you use there. And then you come into the server side and then say, okay, there are multiple layers there. First is the application itself that you've custom built or you have packaged, whatever it is that optimized and is that performing well, right? And then you have kind of, in our case, the data caching layer, in which case it's Coherence, and is that performing well? And then finally the database itself, is that performing well? So all these things we look at every day and make sure that one is we have the metrics to see how well we're doing. And then any kind of change that we make, whether it's a new release or an optimization that we want to do, and measure that again, right? And then the third piece is putting alerts. Where we see a slowdown, immediately getting the alert so that we can address that quickly. And then, so in the coherence layer, now we have a lot of alerts built into it so that we clearly understand what's happening with the distributed cache. One thing that I'm convinced is if you start a business in monitoring tools, you'll just make money, no matter what. Because every company, so we've had 50 tools, we then said we don't like any of them, let's go back to something else, and then we were like again back to 50. So every company I think goes through this. There's no one tool that solves all your problems, and hence you're always looking for the next tool, and everybody comes in and says it'll do everything.